Welcome everybody to Victor's Forbidden Desire. Please do enjoy this next video.
The envelope sat on the rough wooden table like a loaded pistol. Cole Brennan stared at it, his sun-darkened hands trembling as realization crashed over him. He had sent the letter to the wrong address, not to his childhood friend back east, but to Gideon Hale, the rancher who lived 20 miles north. The man with steel-gray eyes who had looked at him exactly once during a cattle trade and made Cole's heart forget how to beat properly. The letter where he had poured out every forbidden longing, every desperate confession about the rancher whose broad shoulders haunted his dreams. And now, as hoofbeats thundered up the dirt road in the dying light, Cole knew Gideon was coming, without warning, without mercy. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. The sun had barely cleared the eastern ridge when Cole Brennan realized what he had done. He stood in the small post office in Silver Creek, his blood turning to ice water, as the postmaster handed him back a piece of mail that had been refused delivery. Not his letter. Someone else's business correspondence, which meant the letter he thought he had addressed to his old friend Thomas in Philadelphia. The letter containing every raw confession he had sworn never to speak aloud had gone to the one man on this frontier who could destroy him with a single word. Gideon Hale. Cole's vision swam, his fingers went numb. The postmaster was still talking, something about incorrect postage, but Cole heard nothing over the roaring in his ears. He stumbled out into the morning heat, the wooden boards creaking under his boots as his mind raced through every damning line he had written. Thomas, I cannot keep this buried any longer. There is a man here, a rancher named Gideon Hale. When he looks at me, I forget my own name. When he stands close enough that I can smell leather and wood smoke on his skin, I lose the ability to think. I know what this makes me. I know the danger. But I would rather face a firing squad than spend another year pretending I do not burn for him. Cole pressed his back against the post office wall, his chest heaving. He had written those words in the dark hours before dawn, alone in his cabin, believing they would travel safely across the country to a friend who understood, who shared the same impossible burden. Instead, they had traveled 20 miles north to the man himself, to Gideon. The image of him rose unbidden in Cole's mind. Tall, solid as the mountains that framed his ranch, hands scarred from years of hard work, a jaw that looked carved from granite, eyes that were the color of storm clouds and just as unreadable. Gideon was a man who spoke little, moved with deliberate purpose, and commanded respect from every cowhand and trader in the territory. And now he knew. Cole pushed himself away from the wall and mounted his horse with shaking hands. He had to get back to his cabin. Had to think. Maybe Gideon would not read it. Maybe he would assume it was a mistake and burn it. Maybe he would simply ignore it, pretend it had never arrived. But as Cole rode back toward his small property at the edge of the valley, he knew those were the desperate hopes of a condemned man. Gideon Hale was not the kind of man who ignored anything. And Cole had just handed him a weapon that could end everything. The cabin came into view as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the dry grass. Cole unsaddled his horse, his movements mechanical, his mind still churning through possibilities. He could leave, pack what little he owned, and ride east before nightfall. Start over somewhere new where nobody knew his name or his shame. But even as he considered it, he knew he would not run. Something stubborn and foolish in him refused. He had built this life with his own hands. This land, this cabin, the small herd of cattle he had worked 5 years to afford. He would not abandon it because of one mistake, even if that mistake might cost him everything. The day passed in a haze. Cole tried to work. even mending fence posts and checking the irrigation ditches, but his hands were clumsy and his concentration shattered. Every distant sound made him jump, convinced he heard hoofbeats approaching. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, his nerves were stretched thin as wire. He was drawing water from the well when he heard it, the unmistakable rhythm of a horse moving at a steady pace. Not hurried, not slow, purposeful. Cole's head snapped up, his heart slamming against his ribs. Through the golden light of late afternoon, he saw the rider, broad-shouldered, sitting tall in the saddle, a dark hat pulled low against the sun. Gideon Hale. For a moment, Cole considered running into the cabin and barring the door like a coward. Instead, he straightened, set down the water bucket, and wadded. His throat was dry as desert sand. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them still. Gideon rode through the open gate and stopped his horse 10 feet from where Cole stood. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Gideon's face was shadowed beneath his hat, unreadable. Then he swung down from the saddle with the easy grace of a man who had spent his life on horseback. He reached into his coat. Cole's breath stopped. Gideon pulled out a folded piece of paper. Cole recognized it immediately. The cream-colored stationery he had bought in town specifically for the letter. The careful script he had labored over for hours. Gideon held it up, his gray eyes fixed on Cole with an intensity that made the air feel too thin. Still, he said nothing. Cole swallowed hard, his voice coming out rough. "I can explain. Can you?" Gideon said. It was not a question. His voice was low, gravelly, the kind of voice that did not need to be raised to command attention. Cole opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he possibly say? The letter spoke for itself. Every forbidden feeling laid bare on the page. Gideon took a step closer, then another. Cole held his ground, even though every instinct screamed at him to retreat. The rancher stopped just outside arm's reach, close enough that Cole could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. "You wrote this," Gideon said, tapping the letter with one finger. "Every word." "Yes," Cole whispered. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Gideon's gaze bore into him, searching, weighing. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Cole could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel the heat radiating from Gideon's body, despite the space between them. Then Gideon did something Cole never expected. He smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was something darker, edged with challenge, and something that made Cole's pulse spike for an entirely different reason. "You spent 5 pages, Gideon said slowly, his voice dropping lower, "telling some stranger back east how you feel about me, how you burn, how you cannot stop thinking about me." Cole's face burned with shame and something fiercer. "But you never once," Gideon continued, stepping closer still until Cole could smell leather and sage and the clean scent of mountain air on him, "thought to tell me directly." The words hit like a physical blow. Cole stared at him, his mind racing. "What are you saying?" Gideon folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into his coat. Then he looked at Cole with those storm cloud eyes, and for the first time, Cole saw something other than unreadable calm there. He saw hunger. "I am saying," Gideon murmured, his voice rough as gravel, "that if you are going to confess something like this, you should at least have the courage to say it to a man's face." Cole's breath caught, his heart hammered so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. "Is that why you rode over here? To tell me I am a coward?" Gideon's jaw tightened. "No. I rode over here because I needed to see if you meant it." The world seemed to tilt. Cole stared at him, unable to form words. Gideon took one more step, closing the distance until they were toe-to-toe, until Cole had to tilt his head back slightly to hold his gaze. The heat between them was suffocating, electric. "Did you mean it?" Gideon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Or was it just words on a page? Cole's hands clenched at his sides. Every rational thought told him to lie, to back away, to protect himself. But standing this close to Gideon, feeling the way the air seemed to crackle between them, he could not. "I meant every word," Cole said, his voice shaking with the force of the admission. Gideon's eyes darkened. "Good." Then he reached out, his calloused hand cupping the side of Cole's face with surprising gentleness, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. Cole's breath stuttered. His skin felt like it was on fire where Gideon touched him. "Because I have been waiting," Gideon said quietly. 2 years for you to stop looking at me like you were afraid I would break you." Cole's mind reeled. 2 years. "You knew," he whispered. "I suspected," Gideon corrected. "But a man does not act on suspicion, not with something like this." His thumb brushed across Cole's cheekbone, a touch so careful it made Cole's throat tighten. Then Gideon's hand dropped away, and the loss of contact felt like cold water. "But now I know," Gideon said. "So you have a choice to make." Cole's voice came out hoarse. "What choice?" Gideon held his gaze, unflinching. "You can tell me to leave. I will ride out of here and we will both pretend this never happened. Or you can invite me inside and we stop pretending altogether." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and danger. Cole's heart raced. His hands trembled. This was the edge of the cliff, the point of no return. He thought of the life he had built here, the careful distance he had maintained from everyone in town, the secrets he had guarded so fiercely. One word from Gideon could destroy it all. But when he looked into those gray eyes and saw the same hunger he felt burning in his own chest, he realized something. He was tired of being afraid. "Come inside," Cole said. Gideon's expression did not change, but something in his eyes flared bright and fierce. He gave a single nod, then turned to lead his horse toward the small stable beside the cabin. Cole watched him move, his mind still trying to catch up with what was happening. This was real. Gideon was here, and he wanted this as much as Cole did. By the time Gideon returned from securing his horse, Cole had managed to get his hands steady enough to light the lamp inside the cabin. The small space filled with warm, a flickering light as Gideon stepped through the door and closed it behind him. The cabin suddenly felt much smaller. Gideon removed his hat, setting it on the rough wooden table beside the lamp. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and in the lamplight, Cole could see the silver threading through it at the temples. He looked older up close, the lines on his face deeper, but it only made him more compelling. They stood facing each other in the center of the room, the silence stretching taut. "I do not know how to do this," Cole admitted quietly. "I have never." Gideon's expression softened slightly. "Neither have I. Not like this." The confession surprised Cole. "You have not?" "No," Gideon said. "I have spent my whole life keeping this buried. Same as you." "Then why now?" Cole asked. "Why risk everything?" Gideon stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. "Because I read what you wrote, about how you would rather face a firing squad than pretend for another year, and I realized I felt the same way." His hand came up again, this time sliding into the hair at the nape of Cole's neck, and Cole's eyes fluttered closed at the sensation. "I am done pretending," Gideon murmured. Then his mouth was on Cole's, and the world caught fire. The kiss was not gentle, it was desperate, hungry. 2 years of wanting compressed into a single moment. Cole gasped against Gideon's mouth, his hands coming up to grip the rancher's shoulders, needing something solid to hold on to as his knees threatened to give out. Gideon made a low sound deep in his chest, his free hand sliding around Cole's waist, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. Cole could feel the solid strength of him, the heat radiating through layers of cloth, and it made him dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon rested his forehead against Cole's, his eyes closed. "Tell me this is real," Gideon said, his voice rough. "Tell me I did not imagine what you wrote." Cole's hands were still gripping Gideon's shoulders, his fingers digging into the fabric of his shirt. "It is real. I have wanted this, wanted you. For so long, I thought I was losing my mind." Gideon pulled back just enough to look at him, his gray eyes searching Cole's face. "Then we are both mad." Cole laughed, a breathless, shaky sound. "Probably." Gideon's thumb brushed across Cole's lower lip, his gaze following the movement with an intensity that made Cole's breath hitch. "I should have come here sooner. You should have said something instead of waiting." "I am glad you came tonight," Cole whispered. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Gideon's hand tightened in Cole's hair, and when he kissed him again, it was slower, deeper, a claiming that made Cole's entire body respond with fierce heat. They stumbled backward toward the bed in the corner, hands fumbling with buttons and belt buckles, desperation making them clumsy. Cole's shirt hit the floor first, then Gideon's, and when their bare chests pressed together for the first time, Cole made a sound he had never heard himself make before. Gideon eased him down onto the narrow bed, his weight settling over Cole like a promise. The lamplight cast shadows across the hard planes of his body, and Cole traced them with trembling fingers, unable to believe this was happening. "You are shaking," Gideon murmured against his throat. "I am terrified," Cole admitted. Gideon lifted his head, his eyes soft in a way Cole had never seen. "So am I." The honesty in those words steadied something in Cole's chest. He reached up, cupping Gideon's face between his palms. "Then we will be terrified together." Gideon smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Deal?" What followed was a blur of sensation and discovery. Gideon's mouth on his skin, his hands learning the shape of Cole's body with reverent attention. Cole arching into his touch, gasping as pleasure built and built until he thought he might shatter from it. When they finally came together fully, Cole cried out, overwhelmed by the intensity of it. Gideon stilled above him, his breathing ragged. "All right?" he asked, concern threading through the desire in his voice. Cole nodded, unable to form words. Then Gideon began to move, slow and careful at first, then with increasing urgency as Cole wrapped himself around him, urging him deeper, harder, needing more. The cabin filled with the sounds of their breathing, the creak of the bed, the whispered words they spoke against each other's skin. Words that would have been dangerous anywhere else but here, in this small, protected space, felt like salvation. When release finally crashed over them, it was together, bodies locked tight, trembling with the force of it. Cole buried his face in Gideon's shoulder, his hands clutching at the rancher's back as waves of sensation rolled through him. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, heart still racing, skin slick with sweat. Gideon's arm was heavy across Cole's chest, his face pressed into the curve of Cole's neck. Neither of them spoke for a long time, both still trying to process what had just happened. Finally, Gideon lifted his head, his gray eyes searching Cole's face. No regrets. Cole's hand came up to trace the line of Gideon's jaw. "None." "You?" Gideon shook his head slowly. "The only thing I regret is waiting this long." Cole's chest tightened. "What happens now?" Gideon was quiet for a moment, his thumb drawing idle circles on Cole's ribs. "I do not know. This is not something we can let people know about." "I know," Cole said quietly. The reality of their situation was settling back over them like a heavy blanket. "We could be killed for this." Gideon's arm tightened around him. "Then we are careful. We keep this between us." "And that is enough for you?" Cole asked. "Stolen moments when no one is watching?" Gideon shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at Cole. "Is it enough for you?" Cole met his gaze, seeing the same uncertainty there that he felt. I don't know if it has to be. Not forever. What are you saying? Cole took a breath, the idea forming as he spoke. There is land further north, past the high meadows where nobody goes. I have been thinking about moving my herd up there for better grazing. And, Gideon prompted, though Cole could see understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. And you own the property that borders that land. If we both had cabins up there, far from town, far from prying eyes, we would be neighbors, Gideon finished. Nothing strange about neighbors helping each other out, sharing supplies, spending time together. Exactly, Cole said. His heart was racing again, but this time with hope rather than fear. Gideon was quiet, thinking it would take time to set up, months maybe, building a cabin, moving the herd. I have time, Cole said, if you do. Gideon's hand came up to cup Cole's face, his touch gentle. I have waited 2 years already. I can wait a little longer for something real. The words settled into Cole's chest, warm and solid. He turned his head to press a kiss to Gideon's palm. Then we start planning tomorrow. Gideon smiled and Cole felt it like sunlight breaking through clouds. Tomorrow, but tonight. Tonight we do not have to think about tomorrow, Cole finished. Gideon leaned down, his mouth finding Cole's again, and this time the kiss was slow, languorous, full of promise rather than desperation. They had time now. Not much, not yet, but enough for this. As the lamp burned low and the night deepened around them, they explored each other with more patience, learning what made the other gasp, what touches drew soft sounds of pleasure. Gideon discovered that Cole was sensitive along his ribs, that he arched beautifully when Gideon's mouth found the hollow of his throat. Cole learned that Gideon liked his hair pulled, that he made a deep rumbling sound when Cole bit down gently on his shoulder. They mapped each other's bodies like uncharted territory, finding hidden places of pleasure and vulnerability. When they came together again, it was different, slower, deeper, a joining that felt less like desperation and more like inevitability. Cole wrapped his legs around Gideon's waist, his hands sliding up the rancher's sweat-slicked back as they moved together in a rhythm as old as time. Gideon's forehead pressed against his, their breath mingling in the small space between them. Cole could feel every shift and flex of muscle, every tremor that ran through Gideon's body. The intensity of it was overwhelming, but he did not look away from those storm-gray eyes. Say my name, Gideon breathed. I want to hear you say it. Gideon? Cole gasped as pleasure coiled tighter in his belly. Gideon, please. The rancher's rhythm stuttered, then deepened, and Cole cried out as sensation crashed over him in waves. Gideon followed moments later, Cole's name falling from his lips like a prayer, like a confession, like something sacred. They collapsed together afterward, breathing hard, limbs tangled. Gideon rolled to the side, pulling Cole with him, so they lay face to face on the narrow bed. His hand came up to push sweat-dampened hair back from Cole's forehead, the gesture impossibly tender. I did not know it could be like this, Cole admitted quietly. Neither did I, Gideon said. He pressed a kiss to Cole's temple, then his cheek, then finally his mouth. Soft, gentle touches that made Cole's chest ache. Outside, the night was deep and quiet. Inside the small cabin, the lamp had burned down to embers, casting everything in soft shadow. Cole listened to the steady rhythm of Gideon's breathing, felt the solid warmth of him, and thought about the future they had just begun to sketch out. It would not be easy. They would have to be careful, cautious, always watching. But as Gideon's arm tightened around him and sleep began to pull him under, Cole thought maybe it would be worth it. For this, for stolen nights and hidden moments, for the chance to build something real in a world that would never understand. Gideon's voice rumbled against his ear, already rough with approaching sleep. Cole. That letter you wrote. The one I was not supposed to read. Cole's eyes opened. What about it? Keep writing them, Gideon said, but address them to me from now on. Cole's breath caught. You want me to write you letters? Gideon pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I want to know every thought in that head of yours. Every feeling you have been hiding. Everything you were going to tell that friend back east. I want it all. The vulnerability in those words made Cole's throat tight. Even the dangerous parts? Especially those, Gideon murmured. Because they are not dangerous when they are just between us. Cole nodded, unable to speak, past the emotion welling up in his chest. He pressed his face into the curve of Gideon's shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, memorizing it. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other in the narrow bed, the world outside forgotten for a few precious hours. And when dawn came creeping through the windows, bringing with it the reality they would have to face, at least they would face it, knowing they were no longer alone. The first gray light of morning found them still tangled together, reluctant to let go, even as the sun threatened to expose what the night had hidden. Gideon stirred first, his hand trailing down Cole's spine in a gesture that was becoming familiar. I should go, he murmured against Cole's hair. Before anyone sees my horse here. Cole's grip tightened instinctively. Not yet. Just a few more minutes. Gideon shifted, pulling Cole closer instead of pulling away. His lips pressed against Cole's forehead, lingering there. A few more minutes then. They lay in the growing light, neither speaking, both acutely aware that the world outside would soon demand their attention. Cole traced patterns on Gideon's chest, his mind already beginning to catalog the dangers they would face. The town was small, and gossip spread faster than wildfire. If anyone saw Gideon's horse here at dawn, if anyone noticed the rancher riding away from Cole's property with a satisfied look on his face, questions would be raised. Questions that could get them both killed. What are you thinking about? Gideon asked quietly, his fingers threading through Cole's hair. How careful we will have to be, Cole admitted. How easy it would be for someone to put the pieces together if we're not smart about this. Gideon was quiet for a moment. We have both been hiding our whole lives. We know how to be careful. That was before, Cole said. Before we had something to lose. Gideon's hand stilled in his hair. You think this is something we can lose? Cole lifted his head to look at him. I think the world will try to take it from us if we give it the chance. Then we do not give it the chance, Gideon said firmly. We are smarter than they are, more careful, more determined. Cole wanted to believe him, but the fear sat heavy in his chest, a constant weight he could not shake. What if someone already suspects? What if my bringing you inside last night was enough? Gideon cupped his face, forcing Cole to meet his eyes. Listen to me. No one suspects anything. To the world, I am a rancher who came to discuss cattle prices with another rancher. That is all, nothing more. At night, Cole said. You came at night. I came at sunset, Gideon corrected, and I am leaving at dawn. Ranchers keep strange hours. No one will think twice about it. Cole nodded, trying to let the reassurance settle over him. But the fear remained, a quiet whisper in the back of his mind that refused to be silenced. Gideon seemed to sense his continued unease. He rolled them over so he was above Cole, his weight settling comfortably between Cole's thighs. Look at me. Cole met his eyes. I am not going to let anything happen to you, Gideon said, his voice low and intense. And I am not going to let anyone take this from us. Do you understand? Cole swallowed hard. You cannot promise that. Watch me, Gideon said. Then he kissed Cole with a fierceness that stole his breath, a claiming that made his toes curl and his heart race. When he finally pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. I have spent 43 years on this earth feeling like half a man, like something was missing that I could never find. And then you sent me that letter, and suddenly everything made sense. Cole's hands gripped Gideon's shoulders. I did not mean to send it to you. I know, Gideon said, but you did, and now I know what it feels like to be whole. I am not giving that up. Not for anyone. Not for anything." The conviction in his voice made Cole's chest tight. He pulled Gideon down into another kiss, this one slower, deeper, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally broke apart, the sun had cleared the eastern ridge, painting the cabin walls in gold. Gideon sighed and pressed one last kiss to Cole's mouth before reluctantly pulling away. "Now I really do need to go," he said, though his hands lingered on Cole's skin, as if unwilling to break contact. They dressed in silence, the intimacy of the night before giving way to the practical necessities of the day. Cole watched Gideon button his shirt, buckle his belt, settle his hat on his head, watched him transform back into the taciturn rancher the world knew, hide in the tender man Cole had discovered beneath. It made something ache in his chest. At the door, Gideon paused. His hand came up to touch Cole's face one last time. 3 days. "Do not forget." "I will not forget," Cole promised. "And Cole," Gideon said, his thumb brushing across Cole's lower lip, "be careful. Do not do anything that might draw attention." "I will be careful," Cole said. Gideon nodded, then stepped out onto the porch. Cole followed, leaning against the doorframe as Gideon walked to his horse. The morning air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of sage and pine. In the distance, a hawk circled lazily against the brightening sky. Gideon swung into the saddle with practiced ease, then looked back at Cole. The distance between them suddenly felt vast, even though it was only a few yards. "Thursday?" Gideon said. "Thursday," Cole echoed. Then Gideon turned his horse and rode out through the gate, his back straight, his posture revealing nothing of what had passed between them. Cole watched until he disappeared over the ridge. I then stood watching the empty horizon for long minutes after, as if he could will Gideon to reappear. Finally, he went back inside and closed the door. The cabin felt different now. The beds still rumpled from their bodies, the scent of wood smoke and sweat and something distinctly Gideon lingering in the air. Evidence of what they had shared scattered everywhere Cole looked. He should clean it up, air out the cabin, wash the sheets, erase the evidence. But instead, he found himself sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand smoothing over the place where Gideon had slept, reluctant to let go of even this small reminder. 3 days. It felt like an eternity. Cole forced himself to stand, to move, to begin the day's work. He had cattle to tend and fences to mend and 100 other tasks that demanded his attention. But as he went through the motions, his mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment of the night before. The way Gideon had looked at him, the way he had touched him, the promises they had whispered in the dark. By mid-morning, he could not stand it anymore. He went to his small desk and pulled out paper and pen, Gideon's words echoing in his mind. "Write it all down for me." His hand trembled as he began to write, but once he started, the words flowed like water breaking through a dam. He wrote about waking up in Gideon's arms, about the fear that had gripped him in the morning light, about the ache of watching him ride away. He wrote about the way the cabin felt empty now, how he could still smell Gideon on his skin and wanted nothing more than to have him back. He wrote until his hand cramped and the sun climbed high in the sky, pouring everything onto the page. When he finally set down the pen, he had filled 6 pages front and back, every word a confession, every line a prayer that this fragile thing between them would survive. He folded the pages carefully and tucked them into his coat pocket, already counting the hours until Thursday when he could place them in Gideon's hands. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Cole worked mechanically, his body going through familiar motions while his mind wandered. He kept catching himself looking toward the ridge, half expecting to see Gideon riding back, knowing he would not come but unable to stop hoping. As evening fell and Cole sat alone by his fire, He thought about the future Gideon had painted for them. 2 cabins in the northern meadows, or a life where they could be together without constantly looking over their shoulders. It seemed too perfect to be real, too good to actually happen. But Gideon believed it was possible, and Cole wanted desperately to believe it too. He pulled out the letter he had written that morning and read it over again in the firelight. So much vulnerability laid bare on the page, so much trust placed in a man he had known intimately for only one night. It should terrify him. Instead, it felt right. He added one more line at the bottom. "I trust you with this, with all of it, with everything I am." Then he signed it and set it aside, ready for Thursday. 3 days. He could survive 3 days. He had to. Cole's arms tightened around him instinctively. Stay a little longer, just until the sun clears the ridge. Gideon hesitated. He then settled back down, pressing a kiss to Cole's shoulder. A little longer then. They lay in comfortable silence, the golden light slowly filling the cabin, painting everything in warm hues. Cole traced idle patterns on Gideon's chest, his mind already racing ahead to the logistics of what they had discussed. Moving his herd north would require careful planning. He would need to scout the land properly, find a good water source, build shelter for the animals before winter set in. "What are you thinking about?" Gideon asked quietly. "Practicalities," Cole admitted. "If we're really going to do this, move north. I need to start preparing soon. The weather will turn in a few months." Gideon's hand stilled on his back. "You're serious about this? About us?" Cole lifted his head to look at him. "Are you not?" "I am," Gideon said. "I just keep expecting to wake up and find this was all a dream, that I imagined reading your letter, that you did not actually say yes when I asked to come inside." Cole leaned up and kissed him, slow and thorough. "Does that feel like a dream?" Gideon's eyes were dark when Cole pulled back. "No, that feels real." "Good," Cole murmured, "because I need you to be real. I need this to be real." They kissed again, deeper this time, and Cole felt the familiar heat beginning to build between them once more. But Gideon pulled back with visible effort, his breathing already rougher. "I really do need to go," he said, though his hands contradicted his words by pulling Cole closer, "before I lose what little self-control I have left." Cole smiled against his throat. "Would that be so terrible?" "Yes," Gideon groaned, "because if I start again, I will not leave until nightfall, and that would raise questions neither of us can afford to answer." The reminder of reality was like cold water. Cole sighed and reluctantly pulled away, already missing the warmth of Gideon's body against his. "You're right. I know you are right." They dressed in silence, stealing glances at each other, hands brushing as they moved around the small cabin. When Gideon buckled his belt and reached for his hat, Cole caught his wrist. "When will I see you again?" he asked, hating how vulnerable the question sounded. Gideon turned, his free hand coming up to cup Cole's face. "Soon. I will come back as soon as I can without drawing suspicion." "How soon is soon?" Gideon's thumb brushed across Cole's cheekbone. 3 days. I will ride into town on Thursday for supplies. Meet me at the North Fork of Miller's Creek at sunset. We can talk about the land, make real plans." Cole nodded, committing it to memory. Thursday, sunset, North Fork. "And Cole," Gideon said, his voice dropping lower, "bring one of those letters you promised me." The request sent heat curling through Cole's belly. "You want me to write you another letter? After everything I said last night?" Gideon smiled, that rare expression that transformed his entire face. "I want to know what you're thinking when I'm not here, what you feel when you remember last night. Write it all down for me." Cole's breath caught. "All right, I will." One last kiss, deeper and more desperate than the others, and then Gideon pulled away and headed for the door. Cole watched him saddle his horse, the morning light catching in his dark hair, highlighting the silver at his temples. He looked solid and real and impossibly dear, and Cole's chest ached with the fear that something might happen before Thursday, that this fragile new thing between them might shatter. As if sensing his thoughts, Gideon paused before mounting up. He met Cole's eyes across the yard, and the intensity in his gaze made Cole's knees weak. 3 days, Gideon said, and then whatever comes after, we face it together. Together, Cole echoed. Gideon swung into the saddle and rode out through the gate without looking back, but Cole stood watching until he disappeared over the ridge, the dust from his horse's hooves the only evidence he had been there at all. The cabin felt impossibly empty in his absence. Cole went through the motions of his morning routine in a daze. He fed the chickens. He checked on the cattle, drew water from the well, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment of the night before. Gideon's hands on his skin, his voice rough with desire, the way he had looked at Cole like he was something precious and dangerous all at once. By midday, Cole found himself sitting at his small table with pen and paper, Gideon's request echoing in his mind. "Write it all down for me." He stared at the blank page for a long time, unsure where to begin. How did he capture in words what he had felt last night? How did he describe the way the world had tilted on its axis when Gideon kissed him? Finally, he put pen to paper and let the words flow. "Gideon," he wrote, "I am trying to work, but all I can think about is the way you looked in the lamplight. The way you touched me like I was something you had been searching for your whole life. I keep reliving every moment, every kiss, every whispered word. My hands still shake when I remember how it felt to finally say your name out loud, to hear you say mine like it mattered, like I mattered. I know we agreed to wait 3 days, but already it feels like too long. The cabin is too quiet without you. The bed is too empty. I catch myself looking toward the ridge, hoping to see you riding back, knowing you will not come but hoping anyway. You asked me to write down what I am thinking when you are not here. So here it is. The truth. I am terrified. Not of being caught, though that fear is real and constant. I am terrified that this feeling, this impossible connection between us, will somehow slip away. That I will wake up and find it was all a dream after all. But I'm also more alive than I have been in years. You have given me hope for a future I never thought I could have. A life where I do not have to hide who I am or what I feel, where I can build something real with someone who understands. 3 days. I will count every hour until Thursday. Yours, Cole. He read it over twice, his heart pounding. It was raw and honest and dangerous, but that was what Gideon had asked for. So Cole folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket, already anticipating the moment he could place it in Gideon's hands. The next 3 days passed with agonizing slowness. Cole threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the constant awareness of time crawling by. He rode out to scout the northern meadows Gideon had mentioned, studying the lay of the land with new eyes. There was good grazing here, plenty of water from the mountain runoff. It was isolated, a solid day's ride from the nearest town, perfect for 2 men who needed privacy. He found himself imagining it. 2 cabins, close enough that they could walk between them easily. Land they could work together, cattle they could raise side by side. A life where they did not have to hide, at least not from each other. It felt too good to be real, too perfect to actually happen. But Thursday came, and as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Cole saddled his horse and rode toward Miller's Creek, with the letter burning a hole in his pocket and hope burning even fiercer in his chest. Gideon was already there when Cole arrived, his horse tied to a cottonwood tree. The man himself standing on the bank of the creek with his arms crossed, watching the water flow past. He turned when he heard Cole approach, and the smile that crossed his face was worth every anxious hour of the past 3 days. "You came," Gideon said. Cole dismounted and walked toward him. "Did you think I would not?" "I hoped you would," Gideon admitted. "But hope and certainty are different things." Cole reached into his coat and pulled out the letter, holding it out. "You asked me to write this. I hope you meant it." Gideon took the letter, his fingers brushing Cole's in a touch that sent sparks up his arm. "I meant it." He unfolded the paper and read in the fading light, his expression unreadable. Cole watched him, his stomach twisting with anxiety. Had he said too much, been too honest? When Gideon finally looked up, his eyes were dark and intense. "Come here." Cole closed the distance between them, and Gideon pulled him into a kiss that tasted like relief and longing and something deeper. When they broke apart, Gideon kept his forehead pressed against Cole's. "You are not the only one who is terrified," he said quietly. "I keep thinking this is too good to last, that something will happen to take it away. Then we hold on tight while we have it," Cole said, "and we build something strong enough to withstand whatever comes." Gideon nodded slowly. "Show me the land you found." "The northern meadows." They walked along the creek as the sun set, talking about practical things. Water sources and grazing patterns and how long it would take to build 2 cabins before winter. But underneath the practical discussion was a current of something else. Something warm and solid and real. As darkness fell, they made camp by the creek, building a small fire and sharing the bread and dried meat Cole had brought. They sat close, shoulders touching, and watched the stars come out one by one. "Tell me something," Gideon said after a long silence. "Something you have never told anyone else." Cole thought for a moment. "When I was a boy, before I understood what I was, I thought there was something wrong with me. The way I looked at other boys. The way they made me feel. I prayed every night for it to change. To be normal." "Did it work?" Gideon asked gently. "No," Cole said. "Eventually I stopped praying for it to change and started praying just to survive it. To make it through each day without anyone figuring out the truth." Gideon's hand found his in the darkness, their fingers lacing together. "I did the same thing. Spent so many years trying to bury it, to be what everyone expected. Built my whole life around keeping this secret." "And now?" Cole asked. "Now I'm tired of hiding," Gideon said. "At least from you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands still linked, the fire crackling softly between them. Cole felt something settle in his chest, a piece he had not known he was missing. "I brought something for you too," Gideon said eventually, reaching into his own coat. He pulled out a small, leather-bound journal and handed it to Cole. "What is this?" "A place for you to write," Gideon said. "All those letters you're going to send me. I want you to keep copies, so when we are old and gray up in those northern meadows, we can read them and remember how we started." Cole's throat tightened. His fingers traced over the smooth leather. "You really believe we'll make it that far? Old and gray together?" "I have to believe it," Gideon said. "Otherwise, what is the point of any of this?" Cole opened the journal, finding the first page already inscribed in Gideon's neat handwriting. To Cole, it read, "For every truth we could not speak aloud, for every moment we had to hide, and for the future when we will not have to do either." The words blurred as tears pricked at Cole's eyes. He blinked them back and looked at Gideon, who was watching him with an expression so tender it made his chest ache. "Thank you," Cole managed. Gideon leaned over and kissed him softly. "Write it all down, the good and the bad and everything in between, so we never forget." They stayed by the creek until late, out talking and planning and stealing kisses in the firelight. When they finally lay down together under the stars, wrapped in bedrolls pulled close, Cole felt something he had never felt before in his entire life. He felt like he belonged somewhere. The weeks that followed fell into a careful rhythm. Cole worked his land during the day, preparing to move his herd north. Gideon did the same on his ranch 20 miles away. They met when they could, always careful, always watching for prying eyes. sometimes at Miller's Creek, sometimes in the high meadows where nobody went. And Cole wrote. He filled page after page of the journal Gideon had given him, documenting everything. The way Gideon's laugh sounded when he was truly happy, the feel of his hands, rough with calluses but impossibly gentle, the plans they made in hushed voices under starlight. He wrote about the fear, too, the constant awareness that one wrong move, one person seeing them together in a way that raised suspicion, could end everything. The nightmares where he woke up alone, Gideon gone, the world having discovered their secret and destroyed them both for it. But mostly, he wrote about hope, about the future they were building together, one careful step at a time. 2 months after the night Gideon had ridden to his cabin, Cole drove the first post for his new cabin in the northern meadows. Gideon was there, helping him measure and mark, the two of them working side by side as the sun climbed high. "This is really happening," Cole said, wiping sweat from his brow. Gideon looked at him, squinting against the sun. "Having second thoughts?" "No," Cole said firmly. "I'm just making sure it is real." "It is real," Gideon said. He glanced around, checking that they were truly alone, then stepped close and pressed a quick kiss to Cole's temple. "We are making it real." They worked through the day, raising the frame of what would become Cole's cabin. By sunset, the skeleton of walls stood against the sky, a promise taking physical form. They sat on the half-finished porch, passing a canteen of water back and forth, admiring their work. "My cabin will be there," Gideon said, pointing to a spot about a quarter-mile away, sheltered by a stand of pines, close enough to help each other, far enough that it will not raise questions. "Perfect," Cole said. He looked at the land spread out before them, imagining it, their own corner of the world where they could be themselves. Gideon's hand found his, their fingers linking in the fading light. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For sending that letter to the wrong address," Gideon said, and there was humor in his voice but also deep sincerity. "For being brave enough to write down the truth, even if you did not mean for me to see it. For saying yes when I asked to come inside. For all of it." Cole squeezed his hand. "I think we can both agree it was the best mistake I ever made." They sat together as the stars came out, planning the next steps. Gideon's cabin would go up next. Then they would move their herds north, a gradual process that would not draw attention. By winter, they would both be established here, neighbors by day, something far more precious by night. It would not be perfect. They would still have to be careful when they went to town. You still have to maintain the fiction that they were simply two ranchers helping each other out. But here, in this isolated corner of the territory, they could have something close to freedom. As autumn painted the meadows gold and red, both cabins took shape. Cole and Gideon worked together whenever possible, each helping the other raise walls and lay floors. Other times, when someone from town happened by, or when the risk of being seen together too often grew too great, they worked alone and made up for lost time when they could steal moments in the evening. Cole continued filling the journal, and true to his word, he gave Gideon copies of everything. The rancher kept them in a locked box beneath the floorboards of his new cabin, a secret archive of their growing love. On the first night, they both slept in their completed cabins. Each a quarter-mile apart, but connected by a well-worn path between them. Cole lay awake, listening to the wind in the pines and thinking about everything that had brought him here. A misdirected letter. A risk that should have destroyed him. Instead, it had given him a future he never dreamed possible. He got up and lit his lamp, pulling out the journal. One more entry before sleep. "Gideon," he wrote, "tonight I am sleeping in the cabin we built together, and you are sleeping in yours a short walk away. Anyone looking at us would see two independent ranchers making their way on the frontier. But we know the truth. We are building a life together, one that is ours and ours alone. I still cannot believe this is real sometimes, that I get to have this. Have you? There are moments when the fear tries to creep back in, when I remember how easily this could all fall apart. But then I think about the way you look at me when you think I am not watching, the way you say my name like it is something sacred, the way we fit together, working side by side, building this future with our own hands. The world may never understand what we have. We may have to hide it for the rest of our lives. But here, in these meadows, we have carved out a space that is ours, and that is enough. You are enough. More than enough. You are everything. Always yours, Cole. He closed the journal and set it aside, then extinguished the lamp and returned to bed. Through the window, he could just make out the faint glow of light from Gideon's cabin. He smiled, knowing the rancher was probably writing too, documenting this same night from his own perspective. And tomorrow they would wake and tend their cattle and work their land. To the outside world, they would be neighbors and nothing more. But at night, when the world could not see, they would walk the path between their cabins and fall into each other's arms. Two men who had found something rare and precious in a world that would condemn them for it. And for now, for this moment, that was enough. The winter came hard and fast, blanketing the northern meadows in snow. But Cole and Gideon were prepared, their cabins tied and warm, their cattle sheltered, their supplies laid in. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading to each other from the journals they had kept, sharing memories of how they had gotten here. Sometimes Gideon stayed the night, the two of them wrapped together against the cold. Other times, they maintained their separate spaces, keeping up appearances even when there was no one around to see. It was a delicate balance, but they had gotten good at it. Spring came eventually, melting the snow and bringing new life to the meadows. Cole and Gideon planted crops and expanded their herds and slowly, carefully built the life they had dreamed of. And through it all, Cole kept writing. Every joy, every fear, every moment of gratitude for the mistake that had brought them together. The journal Gideon had given him filled up, then another, then another. A record of a love that had to stay hidden but refused to be diminished. 5 years after Cole had sent that first misdirected letter, he sat on his porch and watched the sunset paint the meadows gold. Gideon rode up the path from his cabin, as he did most evenings. Egan dismounted with the easy grace of a man who had found his place in the world. "Evenin'," he said, climbing the porch steps. "Evenin'," Cole replied, smiling. Gideon settled beside him, their shoulders touching, and they sat in comfortable silence watching the day fade. After all this time, they did not need words to communicate. The simple act of being together was enough. But tonight, something felt different. Cole could sense it in the tension in Gideon's shoulders, in the way his jaw was set just a little tighter than usual. "What is wrong?" Cole asked quietly. Gideon was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded newspaper, the Silver Creek Gazette. He handed it to Cole, without a word. Cole unfolded it, his heart beginning to pound before he even saw what Gideon was showing him. There, on the third page, was a small article. 2 men arrested in Denver. Crimes against nature. Public hanging scheduled for next week. Cole's hands trembled as he read the details. The men had been careful, or so they thought, had maintained separate residences, had been discreet. But someone had noticed, someone had talked, and now they were dead men walking. He set the paper down carefully, his throat tight. This could have been us. It still could be, Gideon said quietly, if we're not careful, if someone starts asking the wrong questions. Cole looked at him, really looked at him. In 5 years, Gideon had aged. There was more silver in his hair now, deeper lines around his eyes. But he was still the same man who had ridden to Cole's cabin that first night, still the same man who had kissed him like he was drowning and Cole was air. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked, the question coming out before he could stop it. "Given up the life you had before? For this?" Gideon turned to look at him, his gray eyes soft in the fading light. "Not once." "Do you?" "Never," Cole said. But seeing that, he gestured to the newspaper. "It reminds me how fragile this is, how easily it could all end." Gideon reached over and took Cole's hand, lacing their fingers together. "Then we make every moment count. We do not waste time on regret or fear. We just live." Cole squeezed his hand. "How do you stay so calm, knowing what could happen?" Gideon was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat again and pulled out a worn piece of paper. He and Cole recognized it immediately, the original letter, the one that had started everything. "I still have it," Gideon said. "I read it sometimes when you're not around, to remind myself that the best things in life sometimes come from mistakes, to remind myself what I am fighting for." Cole's throat tightened. "I was so terrified when I realized where it had gone." "I know," Gideon said, "but you know what I think? I think maybe it was not a mistake at all. Maybe it was meant to find me. Maybe we were always meant to end up here. Even with the danger. Even knowing we could end up like those men in Denver." Gideon set the letter aside and cupped Cole's face in both hands. "Especially knowing that. Because it means every day we have together is a gift. Every night I get to hold you is a victory over a world that wants to tear us apart." Cole leaned into his touch, his eyes closing. "I love you. I do not say it enough, but I love you." "I know," Gideon murmured, "and I love you. That is why we are going to be smarter than those men in Denver, why we are going to survive this." Cole opened his eyes. "How can you be so sure?" "Because we have to be," Gideon said simply. "Because I refuse to let them win." They sat in silence for a while, the newspaper lying forgotten between them. Finally, Cole picked it up and walked to the fire pit behind the cabin. He struck a match and held it to the paper, watching as the flames consumed the words, the faces of the condemned men, the reminder of what they risked every day. Gideon came to stand beside him, his arms sliding around Cole's waist. Together they watched the paper burn to ash, the smoke rising into the darkening sky. "Tell me about the future," Cole said quietly, "the one where we survive this." Gideon pulled him closer. "We grow old together in these meadows. Our herds thrive. Our cabins stand strong. And every night I walk that path between our homes and fall asleep in your arms. And the world never finds out?" "The world never finds out," Gideon confirmed. "Because we are careful. Because we are smart. Because we have too much to lose." Cole turned in his arms, pressing his face into Gideon's shoulder. Promise me we will be okay." Gideon's arms tightened around him. "I promise. Whatever it takes, we will be okay." They stood like that until the fire burned out, holding each other in the gathering darkness. Then Gideon took Cole's hand and led him inside, closing the door on the world and its judgments. That night, they made love with a desperation that had been absent for months, as if the newspaper article had reminded them how precious and precarious their happiness was. Gideon held Cole like he might disappear, and Cole clung to him with equal fierceness, both of them trying to memorize every touch, every sound, every sensation. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, hearts still racing. "I have been thinking," Gideon said quietly, "about adding another room to my cabin, a workshop where I could do leather work in the winter." Cole smiled against his shoulder. "That sounds good. You have always been skilled with your hands. The thing is," Gideon continued, "I would need help building it, and it would make sense for you to use it too, for your own projects." Cole lifted his head to look at him. "You want to build something together?" He's something that connects our cabins even more. Gideon met his eyes. I want to build a life that is so intertwined they could never separate us, even if someone tried. Cole's chest tightened. That's dangerous. The more connected we are, the more obvious it becomes. I know, Gideon said, but I am tired of being cautious, tired of keeping you at arm's length when anyone might see. I want more. What if it costs us everything? Then at least we will have had this, Gideon said fiercely. At least we will have tried to build something real instead of just hiding in the shadows forever. Cole searched his face, seeing the determination there, the refusal to back down, and he realized Gideon was right. They had been so focused on survival that they had forgotten to truly live. All right, Cole said, we build your workshop. We make it something beautiful. Gideon smiled, that rare, transformative expression that Cole treasured. We start tomorrow, but tonight, Cole said, pulling him down into another kiss. Tonight we have this. They made love again, slower this time, savoring every moment. And when they finally fell asleep, wrapped around each other, Cole felt something shift in his chest, a letting go of fear, an acceptance of risk. They would survive this. They had to, because the alternative was unthinkable. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Cole could remember. He and Gideon worked side by side on the workshop addition, their hands moving in practice synchronization. They no longer worried as much about being seen together. Up here in the meadows, they were just two neighbors helping each other. Nothing more. But at night, when they sat by the fire in Gideon's cabin, reading or talking or simply existing in comfortable silence, they were everything to each other. One evening, as snow began to fall outside, Gideon pulled out the box where he kept Cole's letters. 5 years' worth of confessions and declarations, fears and hopes, all carefully preserved. Read me one, Gideon said, handing the box to Cole. Cole sorted through them, finally pulling out one from their second year together. He unfolded it and began to read aloud. Gideon, I woke up this morning and for a moment forgot where I was. Then I heard you chopping wood outside and remembered. I am home, not because of the cabin or the land, but because you are here. You have become my home in a way no place ever could. His voice caught on the last words. Gideon reached over and took his hand. Keep going, he said softly. Cole swallowed and continued. I know we talk about the future we are building, the cabins and the cattle and the life we are making. But the truth is, my future is wherever you are. Even if we lost everything else, as long as I have you, I have enough. He set the letter down, unable to continue. Gideon pulled him close, pressing a kiss to his temple. You still feel that way? Gideon asked. More than ever, Cole whispered. Good, Gideon said, because that is exactly how I feel about you. They sat together as the snow fell harder outside, blanketing the meadows in white. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, and they were safe. For now, that was all that mattered. The years continued to pass. 6 years, 7, 8. Cole and Gideon grew older together. Their lives so intertwined that it became impossible to imagine one without the other. They weathered storms and droughts, good years and bad, always side by side. There were close calls, times when someone from town visited unexpectedly, and they had to scramble to maintain the fiction of separate lives. Times when Cole woke in the middle of the night, terrified that this would be the day they were discovered. But they survived. They endured. And their love grew stronger with each passing season. On the 10th anniversary of the night Gideon had first come to Cole's cabin, they stood together on the ridge overlooking their land. 2 cabins, now connected by more than just a path. A shared workshop, a shared barn. A life built together stone by stone, board by board, moment by moment. 10 years, Cole said softly. I never thought we would make it this long. Gideon's arm came around his shoulders. We will make it 10 more. And 10 after that? How can you be so sure? Because I have you, Gideon said. And you have me. And that is all we have ever needed. Cole leaned into him, watching the sun set over the land they had made their own. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully. Smoke rose from Gideon's chimney. Everything looked exactly as it should. Do you remember that first letter? Cole asked. The one I sent by mistake? Every word, Gideon said. I have it memorized. Cole smiled. I have been thinking about writing another one. A new letter for a new decade. What would it say? Cole turned to face him, his hands coming up to frame Gideon's weathered face. It would say that 10 years ago, I made the best mistake of my life. It would say that every day since has been a gift. It would say that I love you more now than I did then, which I did not think was possible. Gideon's eyes were bright in the fading light. It would say all that, and more, Cole said. It would say thank you for riding to my cabin that night, for not turning away, for building this life with me against all odds. Gideon pulled him close, his forehead resting against Cole's. You do not have to write it down, just tell me. So Cole did. He spoke the words into the gathering darkness, all the love and gratitude and wonder he felt. And Gideon listened, his arms tight around Cole, his heart beating steady and sure against Cole's chest. When the stars came out, they walked back to Gideon's cabin hand in hand, no longer afraid of who might see. Up here in their meadows, they had found freedom. Not complete, not perfect, but real. And as they settled by the fire that night, Cole reached for his journal one last time. Gideon, he wrote, 10 years ago tonight, you rode to my cabin and changed my life forever. I thought I knew what love was. I thought I understood what it meant to need someone, but I knew nothing. You taught me everything. You showed me that love is not just a feeling, but a choice we make every day. A choice to stay, to build, to fight for something worth fighting for. I choose you today. I will choose you tomorrow. I will choose you for every day we have left. And if the world ever tries to tear us apart, I will go down fighting, because you are worth it. Because this, what we have built together, is worth everything. Always and forever yours, Cole. He closed the journal and looked up to find Gideon watching him. That soft expression on his face that Cole had learned to treasure above all else. What did you write? Gideon asked. The truth, Cole said. Just the truth. Gideon smiled and held out his hand. Come to bed. Cole took his hand and let himself be led to the bedroom, to the life they had built, to the future they were still creating together one day at a time. Outside, the wind whispered through the meadows, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. Inside, two men held each other close and dreamed of all the tomorrows yet to come. And in that moment, with Gideon's arms around him and the night stretching ahead full of possibility, Cole knew with absolute certainty that the letter he had sent to the wrong address had found exactly the right person. It was not a mistake. It was destiny, and he would not change a single moment of it. More than enough. It was everything.